Here comes the question. The impact of the disruptive woman movement on society has been positive, negative, or neutral. I am going to take a different position from either of them. So, no doubt that the early waves of feminism had a positive impact on that. But my question is, has this term disruptive woman, has that really done anything to really accelerate this and change things? I'm not so sure. That's our concern here. It's not that we want to take away the great progress that the early feminist movements made. Rather, we want to encourage and build on that in a good way. But this movement has tended to be a little bit of a step in the opposite direction for some reasons that I'm going to tell you now. So there needs to be a balanced focus on this thing and not just unidirectionally focusing only on one. And that, I think, is one of the problems that focusing too much on this disruptive woman concept can bring.
Hi, welcome to Soch with hSA, where philosophy, practical theology, pedagogy, and psychiatry meet. We are continuing our series on the advent of the woman hero. And we have three myths: the myth of the supermom, the myth of the superwoman, and the myth of the disruptive woman. Viewers, this is the part 2 of the myth of the disruptive woman. To know more about this, let me hand over to Dr. Johan.
All right, thank you, Angie. And we're continuing our discussion on the explosive topic of disruptive woman. And as usual, we're going to be starting with a question. We'll give you some options and give you time to think about your answer. And then we'll discuss the answer and we'll round it off with some nice reflection and some music for you. So if you want nice music, you've got to wait till the end. So we encourage you to do that. That's a reward for all of those who stay till the end of the video. So here comes the question. All right. Now, the impact of the disruptive woman movement on society has been 1. Positive. All right. 2. Negative. And 3. Neutral. So the impact of the disruptive woman movement on society has been positive, negative, or neutral. Think about it for a couple of seconds. Meanwhile, let's ask our friends over here.
I think I'll go for option 3, which is neutral, because I don't think so. It has an impact on the society of a disruptive woman.
You are continue to being so negative. Look at all the wonderful things this movement has brought in. Women who were oppressed by men, women who were neglected by men, women who did not have a voice. They have all been risen to their levels. They have been made equal, and they have even overpowered men. And all the positive things of a modern society where equal status for women came because of this disruptive woman. It's been a really positive impact.
Okay, let us hear from Dr. Johan.
All right. It's always entertaining to watch these two fight. So I get a lot of pleasure out of that. That's why we get these sorts of questions there. All right. So let's look at what they said and let's see if either of them is making any sense. Angie actually suggested this third option down here, which is neutral, which means I think she means nothing at all. Correct? She means no, no impact at all. She means that it's not had either a positive or a negative impact. Praveen, on the other hand, is exactly the opposite. He is going for the top option there, which is positive. All right. And because of that, what he's trying to say really is that overall, this has been a great thing for women. The idea has been very uplifting. It's inspired many women to challenge certain difficult circumstances and really do very well. Is that right, Praveen? I think that's what you've been implying.
Yes, that's right.
All right. Okay. Now I am going to take a different position from either of them. And if you really need to see the previous video on this in order to understand why I'm taking this position. But if you haven't, it doesn't matter. You can finish this video and then please do go back and look at the previous one and see that as well. So, the idea of disruptive woman in the context of the cultural neo Marxist overall philosophical position has been quite problematic in many ways. I do accept that there has been great strides in women's liberation, which has really gone on for quite some time. But I would like to submit that what to say, these strides have been going on for a much longer period, at least about a century or a century and a half. Right from the late 1800s, there have been great movements of the early waves of feminism and women's liberation in the late 1800s, early 1900s, which were really, really powerful movements, which really changed the conscience of world society in many ways. It got equal voting rights for women. It brought equal rights in terms of work, in terms of, and over a slightly longer period, even in terms of status and things like this. So it had many positive impacts, no doubt. And I think that a lot of the good that has happened for women has already been happening from that time, and we built on that. Over time, things have gotten even better on that front. And generally speaking, today is a much more equal world for the genders than it was, say, even in the 1800s. So, no doubt that the early waves of feminism had a positive impact on that. But my question is, has this term disruptive woman, which is a rather new term in this context, probably about 2 decades in terms of its common use, has that really done anything to really accelerate this and change things? I'm not so sure. And of course, you have the freedom to disagree with me there. But my bigger concern is that the term has had a kind of a negative connotation, largely because of its strong association with cultural neo Marxism. The idea of Marx that has been transplanted from economic theory into the cultural sphere, that the world is basically consisting of victimized lower classes and oppressive upper classes, and that upper classes are always by nature oppressive and lower classes are always victimized, and the only solution is that the victim should overthrow the oppressors and then make everyone the same and equal and that kind of thing, and that's the only solution to the problem. It's a direct transplantation of Marx into the cultural sphere. That's cultural neo Marxism. Just to remind us what that is. A lot of the ideology behind the disruptive woman term is infused with this underlying idea of cultural neo Marxism. And that sort of brings a kind of very negative attitude towards the whole idea. That's unfortunate because, in some senses, it undoes some of the good that the earlier feminist movements actually did. That's our concern here. It's not that we want to take away the great progress that the early feminist movements made. Rather, we want to encourage and build on that in a good way. But this movement has tended to be a little bit of a step in the opposite direction for some reasons that I'm going to tell you now. Now, interestingly, there's been some very interesting research which has come up of late, which has shown that across the world, uh, especially in developed countries, because probably most of this research was done in developed countries, but across the world in general, in schools and colleges, they found that boys have been falling behind all the way through. That's just one major finding that has come. Schools have tended to largely ignore the problems that boys are having, and that's resulted in a tremendous change in the patterns of enrollment in higher education and the patterns of those sorts of things, where we've not just seen an increase in female enrollment and women performing better there. We've actually seen a decline in the performance of boys and young men in this area, and this could be mirrored in other areas as well. And the troubling trend about this is it doesn't seem to be getting better, it seems to be only getting worse. Now, I'm not saying this is the only reason for that, but there has been a tendency generally in schools and colleges and educational things to put a huge amount of focus on women and girls' problems, and actually not to think much about the problems that boys also have. Now, the assumption was that in the past there was an undue advantage that men had. In some senses, that's true. For a lot of our history, men have been the ones who've been going to school, girls much less. And so, therefore, there was a time when certainly men had a tremendous advantage in these areas. But now, with the women's liberation things and those all which have been going on for the last 150 years, a lot of that has changed. Women have got now more or less equal opportunity in most places, although it's still not everywhere the same. So that has happened, and there continues to be a great focus on the problems and unique problems faced by girls and women in school and colleges. But correspondingly, there's been a decline of focus on the problems that boys have. A simple example of this is focusing on educational techniques and things that seem to work better for girls and ignoring things that seem to work better for boys. One of the classic examples of this is apparently, according to the research, recess. Uh, Across the developed world, the amount of time people have spent in recess in school has been going down systematically. The argument being that we need to spend more time on academics and more time on extracurriculars and less time on things like playing and eating. Now, what was found is, generally speaking, boys tended to do better in schools where they had sufficient time for recess and for things like that, and that helped them to do better. That effect was not really seen in girls because girls didn't seem to mind having less of a recess. But because of this focus on only girls' things, it led to a neglect of the specific things that actually help boys, and that was a problem. Another thing is that, generally speaking, girls tend to study because they have to, and they're quite okay with being told, you need to learn this, you need to study this. They learn well as a whole. I'm not saying all are like that. That seems to be the general trend. Boys tend to need to be told why they need to study something. So a little bit more of the reasoning behind and the application and the structures behind the concept need to be explained in order for them to really grasp the concepts well, if they're and show interest in that. Now, this is interesting. So the fact that uh, you see a lot of schools today where there's a lot of female teachers, you see hardly any male teachers anymore. That's a fact. If you just go to a random school, you can see that there are hardly male teachers and most of them are women. They tend to understand very well the way girls study, and they know very well that just tell them that this is the syllabus and this is the exams and these are the things, and they'll do well. And they've kind of not yet thought about the fact that boys need to be told a little differently to get the same things. Why don't we know these things? It's because we're not really looking into the problems, the unique problems that boys may be having, assuming that they're already, the upper group and the advantaged group. And why give them any choice? Just look at the disadvantaged group and keep building up the disadvantaged group. But we've reached a stage where now, there may even be a redressal in this. And, in some cases, the boys may even be slightly disadvantaged now. Now, we don't want either sex to be disadvantaged. We want both genders to be equal and equal in all ways. So there needs to be a balanced focus on this thing and not just unidirectionally focusing only on one. And that, I think, is one of the problems that focusing too much on this disruptive woman concept can bring. It's just an example. We could talk a lot more, but I think that's all we can discuss today. So that's just one domain in the area of education.
Well, that was an interesting discussion, and I'm waiting to hear what is there in the next set of the videos. But before that, we have an exciting announcement for our friends at Belur. It's a mental health and singing workshop for kids from 4th to 8th standard. It's called Tame Your Dragon, Create Your Story.
It's happening on site at Vellore. May 1st and May 2nd is the workshop, and with a performance on May 3rd, 2025. So if you're interested in sending your kid for this on site workshop, we have limited seats. So please hurry and register using the link in the description below.
We have the future batches for the Understanding the Psyche course coming up. The link is there in the description. We also have the Rainbow in Deluge, our flagship course for less than rupees 600 inclusive of GST. We have a special Women's Day package which contains the Rainbow in Deluge course as well as the Psychosocial Development course for rupees 800 inclusive of GST. And we also have a special package, Understanding Child Development for Parents and Teachers, which includes the Psychosocial Development course as well as the Cognitive and Moral Development course. Both of these courses for just rupees 1000 inclusive of GST.
All right, it's time for us to spend some time in reflection, and we're going to give you some music. So sit back, enjoy the music, and let's just think about the idea of disruptive woman. And if we take it a little too far, do we really, benefit society, or do we cause a different sort of imbalance which might be problematic? And can we look at this whole concept in a more positive way? That's what we want you to think about. Think about the concept. What do we mean by equality?
All right, Dr. Praveen, what to next? What to expect in our next video?
We have only just got started and covered these two things. So lot of questions, lot of conflicting ideas and things and all, but we need to come to a resolution. We need to come to an answer.
Yes.
So hopefully in the next video we might reach somewhere. So viewers, stay tuned for part 3 of the same topic, the myth of the disruptive movement, in the next video. Thanks for joining us once again for Soch with hSA.
Goodbye, viewers. Till we meet in our next video. This is hSA signing off. Stay healthy, stay soching.